Uh, Welcome to you all. Happy to have so many folks here tonight. And I, yeah, just want to put in one quick plug for next month's lecture. While I have the captive audience here. So next month, Marla Deibler will be talking about body-focused repetitive behaviors, specifically with kids and younger folks. So I think that should be a cool talk. I'm pretty excited for it. I know we often see lots of talks and programming around BFRBs in general, and I feel like I less often see it specifically with kids and younger folks. So I think it should be really cool. So yeah, if you're signed up for today, you will also get a reminder for that talk. So hope to see you there. Yeah, let's get started. I think that's really the only major announcement that I have for you. So welcome. So this is the OCD North Carolina lecture series. We do a monthly series with lectures all about OCD and related topics. We have this month's lecture, and then next month will be the last one in the spring series, and then we'll have a little break over the summer, and then we'll be back at it in the fall again. But for this month, I am very excited to have Chris Trondsen here. Chris is an amazing advocate in the OCD community. I won't read your whole bio, Chris, but
You don't have to, I
I will.
promise.
I'll
I won't
highlight
be
a few
insulted.
things. So yeah, Chris is a clinician and an individual with lived experience. He is in California, works at the Gateway Institute as a clinician. He is also the vice president of OCD SoCal. So we are OCD North Carolina. We are the state affiliate of the IOCDF in North Carolina. And OCD SoCal is another affiliate in, as you might imagine, Southern California. And so Chris is the vice president there, does a lot of awesome work for that affiliate. He also leads the IOCDF's BDD and LGBTQ plus SIG, the Significant Interest Group for IOCDF. And he's on the IOCDF board of directors. He runs a really awesome support group for loved ones. Um, he does a lot of really amazing things. Again, I won't go through the whole list, but Chris, yeah, has just been a wonderful contributor to the OCD community. He's been very generous with his time in helping with things like this. So yeah, we're thrilled to have Chris here. And yeah, Chris, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, somebody said hi for my mom in the chat, and my mom just showed up. So she's more famous than me. Everybody loves her. So I'm just my mom's, just my mom's son.
I couldn't find
Well,
the link.
Hi everyone. It's good to see you all. I'm really excited. I'm going to jump right in because I know that I only have an hour and I definitely want to leave time for Q&A. So I'm not going to rush the slides, but any slides that I feel like I'm not a read word for word kind of person. So I'll make sure to more so be, talking from personal clinical experience over the slide. But if you feel like I rushed anything or have more questions, just shoot them in the chat and I'll definitely get to it. But I want to make sure to give y'all time to ask questions and not talk the whole time. So these slides, I think, Ben, do you make the slides available and email them out or not really? I don't want to make a promise.
Yeah, absolutely. If you'd like them
Okay.
available, they can be available. And also just one quick note that I forgot to mention. We'll be recording the talk. It will eventually be up on the YouTube channel, but the Q&A will not be recorded. So people can feel free to ask questions without fear of living on the internet forever.
Cool. All right, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. This says Kim Quinlan on it. So just so everybody knows, myself and Kimberly Quinlan, we created a program for CBT School. She has CBT School, which is a program that allows people to get, treatment guidance, et cetera, on your own pace. And so I'm going to take the slides from there, but that's why it says her name. But today I'm going to go over just like the highlights. These are some of like the main parts of BDD treatment. And just because of time, I won't be able to go through everything, but I want to give people enough that when they leave here today, they feel like they at least understand what BDD is, understand like what treatment looks like, what the treatment is, and like I said, any other questions that y'all have. So the reason the OCD community continues to do presentations on BDD is not just because we're fascinated by it, but BDD is actually an OCD related term. Sorry, condition. So what that means is basically we have in the old DSM, OCD was under anxiety disorders. In the new DSM, which is basically like the book with all the mental health conditions, OCD got its own section, and they incorporated a couple different disorders in with that, and BDD being one of them. Hair picking, skin picking, and hoarding disorder. And it's because there's a lot of consistent qualities of it. You know, there's obsessions and compulsions in BDD. We know the age of onset is pretty similar. We see very similar treatments, a lot of differences as well, but that's why the BDD community talks about it. So what is BDD? Everybody has to kind of know what it is for this whole talk to make sense. So BDD is where an individual is very fixated on an aspect or aspects of their appearance. And that's usually how it starts. So when you talk to somebody who has BDD, they might really hate the size and shape of their nose. They may feel like their skin is either breaking out or red or hate the texture. For a lot of men and women, they don't like their hair. Sometimes it's too much hair for women, or for men, it's hairline. It could also be like chin, typically neck up, but there's also a lot of people that focus on their body. So that might be the shape and size of their body, things not being balanced or feeling like things are not symmetrical. Now, over time, people start to have multiple features they don't like because if you think about it, if you're spending all day critiquing your appearance, looking in the mirror, looking at pictures, etc., you're bound to start finding other things you don't like. And then finally, over time, if you ask an individual with BDD, hey, what don't you like? A lot of people start to say, I just feel ugly. I hate everything about my look. So you can kind of see any of those presentations. So if you're a parent, your child might be at the point when they open up to you that they just say they're ugly. I hate everything. Usually, if you talk to somebody at the very start, there's certain body features they hate the most, but they start to dislike everything. Now, because of that preoccupation of their appearance, then the compulsions come in. This can be things like checking their appearance in a mirror or reflective surfaces like a car window. It can be avoiding the mirror and getting ready in the dark or not letting people take pictures of them. It can be asking people, do they look okay? Does this make me look bad? It also can be things like covering up themselves with clothes, getting plastic surgery, doing different dermatological interventions, things like that. Now, the D, just for fun fact, if you ever see a disorder, the D in the disorder is C. What we see here, it means that this person is starting to find that at least an hour of their day is consumed by their appearance. They're struggling to focus in school. Maybe they can't have a job. They're starting to drop out of the activities they like. Most people with BDD isolate, they don't leave the house. Or sometimes I see people with BDD go out a lot because they're trying to get reassurance from other people. So if they're going out and somebody hits on them or somebody compliments them, it feels so good because it's reinforcement. Like maybe I'm not as ugly as I thought. So just like any disorder, with BDD, people's kind of presentation could be slightly different. And then we'll talk about the last part in an upcoming slide because there's a lot of disorders that people assume is BDD and it's not. We know that on record, we have about 3 to 5 million in the US alone that have BDD, but the thing is, it's probably way more. A unique challenge with BDD that makes it unique, even from OCD, is most people with BDD don't think they have BDD when they first start experiencing the symptoms. So I'm sure if anybody's a spouse or a parent or a loved one of somebody you suspects has BDD, they're not coming up to you right away and saying, I have BDD and I want therapy. Typically, people with BDD think they're just ugly and they just have deformities and they're unattractive. And so the first line that they start looking at is how to camouflage and cover up heavy makeup, wearing a hat, sunglasses, baggy clothes, maybe down the road getting filler or Botox or going to get plastic surgery, veneers, things like that. And a lot of them just think that they are the way that they look. OCD is typically ego dystonic, meaning people don't align with the intrusive thoughts. They actually disturb them and make them feel unhappy. Whereas with BDD, most people think I'm just ugly and I need to get help. Why would I go to a therapist? Typically, if they do go to therapy, it's usually because they're so distraught and just need to talk to somebody about their looks. So that's why we have low numbers and we assume it's higher. BDD affects men and women equally. It's not just a female disorder like some people think. And typically, the age of onset is during teens. And if you think about why, as somebody goes through puberty, starts to kind of recognize the kids that look a certain way get more attention and are popular, they start wanting people to be attracted to them. Appearance becomes very important, kind of around seventh grade, eighth grade, freshman or sophomore of high school, and that's when we see it really coming to a head and starts getting, people starting to show signs and symptoms. Some people have reported signs much earlier, some report it later, especially if somebody has an incident where it does cause some scarring, like somebody who has a botched surgery or something. Sometimes it can be brought on different ways, but typically it's through puberty. And then we know that if we were to go to any dermatology or cosmetic surgeon right now, there would be more people with BDD in that group because people with BDD really seek that out. Typically, the focus is going to be things above the neck, like hair, skin, and nose. Also, size of lips, skin tone, cheekbones, height, weight, certain fixations on sexual body parts. It can be anything. So there's no body part that is not safe from BDD. So it definitely is something that anybody could focus on. There is a qualifier. There's something known as muscle dysmorphia. That is where an individual feels like they're not muscular enough and they continue to hit the gym and exercise all the time to get more muscle and to get bigger size and shape. They get very focused on symmetry and the aesthetic look of their body. And those are people that find themselves starting to engage in things like kind of like some things are going to be more supplemental and things that you can find at a vitamin store, but sometimes it's more illegal things like steroids, and that can affect men or women or anyone for that fact. Well, what causes BDD? The thing that's always hard is this is always something we're trying to look into. We don't have good data for almost any disorder, but we do know that there's a neurobiological component. So if you have a family member or a loved one with obsessive compulsive disorder or body dysmorphic disorder, you're more likely to then have BDD. So when I talk to my clients about that fact, they're like, oh yeah, my dad has it, or my mom is a hoarder, or my cousin has OCD. We know that cultural factors can have a heavy influence. So I've worked with clients that are Asian and Asian American or South Asian, and they get very focused on skin tone. I have people that are African American and focus a lot on like the nose size compared to others. Typically, culture can have an influence. I've had clients that are very focused right now on K-pop culture because that's very popular and want to have the size and shape of that type of body or skin tone. So we know that there's different cultural pressures when it comes to appearance, and that definitely influences people. It's not helpful if somebody has a family that is very focused on appearance, and appearance is very, very important to that family. Because, somebody with BDD is more susceptible to those kind of conversations. So if the person with BDD is picking up that, hey, my family really cares about how we appear to others, and my mom really focuses on her looks as well as my dad, that can have an influence. A lot of people with BDD were teased when they're younger, but here's the thing that's often surprising. They're usually not teased about the actual body part that they have the fixation on, and that's what makes BDD unique. Somebody with BDD may see, let's say, their nose as being large and crooked, and everybody else in their life either doesn't see it or that it's like, wait, it's slightly crooked, but not to the point that you should be this fixate on it. So typically, my clients weren't being teased about the body part they don't like. Maybe it was about their looks, or maybe it was about other factors, but they hated the feeling of being teased. And so then as they get older and BDD gets worse, they really don't want to be made fun of. And they start to think one of the ways I can prevent from feeling hurt is changing my appearance so nobody will make fun of me. Here's just some things that we typically see with clients with BDD. A lot of times we do see physical and sexual abuse. We see neglect from family members, parents, and others. Like I said, bullying or teasing, and a focus on appearance in the family. There's a lot of social anxiety co-occurring with BDD, meaning that they're shy, don't like to be put out there, speak in front of groups, because obviously all eyes are on you. And then it feels like, wow, now everybody's staring at my appearance. And we see family dysfunction. So these things tend to be it. And it's not for not everybody. I mean, besides being a clinician that specializes in the treatment of OCD and BDD, I also have BDD. And some of these things I don't relate to. Some of them I do. I'm not very socially withdrawn, as people who know me will say that. But, some people with BDD, this is common. Here's some just other stats taken from The Broken Mirror, a book, the first book on BDD. But it just shows that, sometimes people feel they don't have BDD because they read that part that says one body part and think, well, I don't like everything. So just like anything, there's different levels of severity. And I see with people that have gone undiagnosed and untreated, they typically start to dislike almost every aspect of their appearance. And this was muscle dysmorphia we talked about a little bit earlier. I know I went over this a little bit, but here are some of the behaviors that we see a lot in. So that mirror checking or the other factor of like avoidance, a lot of self-criticism. We see a lot of self-hate, a lot of judgment on a person when they have BDD, and it starts to bleed into other things, including things that have nothing to do with appearance. So, their job or their, how they're doing in school. A lot of camouflaging, so only going at night or wearing a certain type of jacket because if somebody thinks their shoulders are too wide, they might wear a jacket to cover their shoulders up. And then as people get older, we tend to not see medical procedures when somebody's in like middle school, for instance. But I've worked with clients that have done all different things. I've had clients that have gone and got, filler, not liked it, and then on their own trying to push the filler around and kind of do their kind of like own home medical procedures. I've seen clients like cut parts of their skin they didn't like the texture on. So people will take extreme measures if they're severe and they can't afford the procedures. This is not ever something I like to brag about, especially with my mom in the audience, but she was very there present. But like an example is when I was in high school and I was so fixated on my skin, I asked my mom to buy me certain skincare products, but I was asking her every single week and it got really expensive. And so I shoplifted skin products that I felt I needed out of that desperation, even though that is not the type of kid I was raised to be. So people with BDD take drastic measures because the feeling is if I don't fix my appearance, I can't be accepted, I can't be loved, and I shouldn't be out in public. A lot of grooming. So if you have a loved one in your life with BDD, or if you're a clinician treating BDD, the grooming is a big part of it. People can take hours getting ready, sometimes touching the body part, looking for bumps to try to pick at their acne. A lot of people with BDD feel like their skin, their face, or even features of their appearance can change overnight. So they're constantly touching and checking to see if anything's changed. And then another feature of BDD is we found through research that people tend to have a delusion of reference, this idea that people are taking special notice of them. So that's one of the reasons people with BDD tend to hate going out in public, is they have a feeling that other people are staring at them, judging them, taking special notice of their flaws and their appearance in general. And we found that people with BDD, when they were given faces and different expressions to look at, people without BDD were pretty good at saying that person looks happy, angry, sad. People with BDD kind of misread all faces and just thought people were disgusted or judging or angry, which is often why people, when they go out, they assume that people are taking special notice, but also having an unpleasant experience when they look at them. Like I said, you'll get all of these slides. This YouTube link, I'm not going to play the video. It's only about 7 minutes though, but it's this video. BDD patients see their faces differently. I'll talk about it in the next slides, but the good thing is we do have a lot of research that shows people with BDD actually see themselves differently. And the reason it's so important, these studies found the same, is because people with BDD have to know that the reason they feel the way they do is because they see themselves differently. Most people with BDD think their friends and family are lying to them or telling them what they want to hear. They think their therapists aren't being honest with them, but it's genuinely because the way that their brains are firing, the way that their brains are structured, they see their appearance much differently. Additionally, people with BDD tend to get really close in a mirror, stare at a body part for a really extended period of time. So if your brain is already seeing it differently and now you're kind of zooming in on a body part and staring at it for hours, you're going to see it different than the average person who sees you from a distance, makes comfortable eye contact, and isn't judging you. So I'm not going to read this word for word, but I want to talk about a couple things that we see in BDD. So we do know that there's something going on with serotonin like OCD, and that's why often an SSRI, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor like Prozac or Luvox or Lexapro is typically the frontline medications. But some of the things that we see different with BDD is the one I'm going to focus on a lot is visual processing. When people with BDD were in studies, they were really good at finding and fixating on little details in a picture. So they would see a picture of a face, and the person with BDD would be able to notice every little scar or every little hair, every little feature. They would miss the holistic picture. And so when they were asked questions more about the face in totality, they weren't good at that, but they were really good at finding details. In that video that I gave you the link to in these slides, it actually shows how people with BDD, instead of making comfortable eye contact, they're scanning constantly looking for different things. They do eye tracking software. So if you think about it, if somebody with BDD fixates on finite details, and they even found that in non-facial objects, so they would show them pictures of a house, the brain would light up when it would see a picture that had high details. Somebody with BDD's brain goes really into details. And that's why sometimes my clients will say, oh, I'll notice a scratch on a car before anybody else in my house. Or if somebody gets a haircut, I notice it before other people. The other thing that they found is in a typical brain that doesn't have BDD, when they're looking at a face, the right hemisphere lights up. And that's the part of the brain that can see a full picture. In somebody with BDD, the left hemisphere lights up, and that's the part of the brain that focuses on fine details. You want that if you're hammering a nail or painting this really little part of a picture. But looking at faces, you want to be able to just see the whole person, the big picture. But they found people with BDD don't. They zoom in on these details. Now add that person standing half an inch away from a mirror with subjective and criticizing internal dialogue, with staring at it for a long time and having like overwhelming anxious feelings causing them to feel distressed. All of that together is why somebody watching right now with BDD sees themselves differently than their friends and their family. People don't see them the same way they see themselves, and it's important for somebody to know so it gives them some hope that this is a mental health condition and not a physical condition. I'll say it later when we talk about plastic surgery, but that's why clients who do spend years and years getting surgeries and camouflaging and all these different changes to their appearance never feel 1% happier. They're on to the next flaw, or they feel miserable. They feel like it was botched because it's not about your appearance. I'm going to skip the next three slides quickly because these are just great books that I hope everybody looks at if they need additional help. The reason it is so important for people to get BDD is we see really, really high levels of suicidality in people with BDD, which is why it's important to get help. Here are some of the misdiagnoses that people have for BDD. So these are the things people are getting diagnosed with instead of BDD. An eating disorder is when an individual focuses on food as a method to lower body weight or change body weight in a satisfactory way. So the biggest one that we know is anorexia nervosa, where a person limits their caloric intake drastically to try to lose overall weight, different than BDD. Now, I will say a lot of people with BDD do have a co-occurring eating disorder. We'll talk about the difference between body dysmorphia or body image and BDD, but anybody suffering from BDD like myself knows, oh, I'm not suffering anymore, but when I had it, BDD like OCD is chronic, it's year round, it's disturbing, it causes such distress. Somebody who posts a picture online and they're like, oh, I have body dysmorphia, I hate my body in this bathing suit. That's not chronic. That's not year round. That's not causing them distress to the level that they're not posting the picture. So it doesn't mean that people don't struggle with body image, just like people out there may like to pray a lot or organize their shelf, but that's different than actually being diagnosed with BDD. BDD is definitely not narcissism. In fact, most people with BDD think they look different, odd, or strange, and really just want to feel normal. If somebody is picking their hair or skin, sorry, pulling their hair or they're picking skin for anxiety or boredom reasons, we wouldn't consider it BDD. People that do that for BDD are because they're trying to get rid of hair or clear their skin and they're doing it kind of in a self-measure. Somebody with social anxiety is anxious about how people might think they speak or present, or they might feel odd or like they don't connect with people. But if it comes back down to appearance, that's BDD. It's not social anxiety. People with BDD tend to have depression, but we wouldn't consider BDD a depression. Almost everybody with BDD has depression, but it's separate. And then lastly, some people with OCD do focus on being perfect, but that's typically around their schoolwork, their keeping their items nice. Maybe it's combing their hair and their part is perfect because they want to present nice from work, but it's not where they actually think that a part of their appearance is flawed and they're really desperate to get that body part fixed. But there's a lot of things that people with BD have co-occurring. I would say social phobia, known as social anxiety, is huge. A lot of people have substance use disorder to try to cope. And we know that there are some personality disorders like borderline personality disorder that we see. Doesn't mean everybody with BDD has all of these things, no. But it's pretty common occurring. I'm one of those people that has OCD and BDD. Yay, you get both. It's like collecting Pokemon. I was like, one is already hard enough. Don't give me two, but it is difficult. We talked about this a little bit, but the difference between body image concerns are like when people have temporary concerns about diet, or maybe they do constantly thinking about wanting to change their weight, but it typically isn't enough to keep them from working or seeing friends or engaging in the activities they once found so important. Instead, they're at a point where they can still function. They're just unhappy about how they look. Plastic surgery tends to be sort of this like final solution if everything else hasn't worked. And it doesn't work. We know very well with studies that people that get plastic surgery typically hate it. They miss their old body part, or they don't like now how the rest of their face or body looks after the surgery. Or in those rare instances where somebody does like their plastic surgery, then they start to find a new problem and chase that with surgery. And then when we see those kind of glamorized stories online or in TV shows and stuff where someone's had like 40 surgeries. Michael Jackson is one that comes to mind. It's typically like at that point where they just become almost addicted to the surgery to try to fix everything. I would say in my own clinical practice, I see a lot of people that are very unhappy with their plastic surgery. They want so badly to go back and never have gotten it, or they've gotten to a point that they're suing a plastic surgeon because they feel like it was botched. So I'm glad I was too broke to ever get plastic surgery and I got treatment instead. But my heart goes out a billion times for people that have gotten plastic surgery before they knew what they had. And that's one of the reasons why part of the work that we do with the BDD special interest group is we're trying to find ways to intervene with plastic surgeons and require a BDD checklist before somebody goes through with surgery. A colleague of ours in Canada was able to pass such measure. Social media is also very, very, very part of the BDD experience. It's a lot of following plastic surgeons, but also it's following people that have like the ideal body or face or facial structure that they want. And so people are scrolling all day. I remember talking to some of my colleagues that have been doing this, before I was even born, and they said it was already hard, when people would compare to their friends and family or get a magazine, delivered to the house each month to compare and to fixate on appearance. But now with social media, I have clients that are spending hours upon hours on social media, scrolling, comparing themselves to others, fixating on body parts, reading comments, and that's a part of the conversation. So only following accounts that actually bring joy versus ones that you're using for BDD comparison reasons, and then limiting the amount of time. And here are just some of the basic goals that we're trying to get with BDD. I want to highlight number 4. Your people with BDD get so focused on appearance that they start to think that the only thing that matters is appearance. They're going to get a job when they look good enough. They'll get a partner when they look good enough. They'll have friends when they look good enough. And they stop kind of caring about the other aspects that make them great. I had a client today who's doing really well in treatment and was like, we were talking about dating, and he's like, I have so many other things to offer besides my looks. And that's what we're trying to get to, right? Is get to someone recognizing that they're more than just their appearance. But through treatment, reducing avoidance, improving daily functioning, and really just reconnecting to life outside of BDD. As we start to get into the treatment for BDD, one of the first things that somebody should do, and this is something that you can do if you have BDD and are watching this, start to track. I will ask a client, how often do you think you look at reflective surfaces? I don't know, 3 times a day, and then they'll track and it's more like 40. And I always tell clients, don't be embarrassed. Most people's numbers are in the 30s, 40s, 50s, etc. So awareness is so important. So starting to track and learn just how often you're doing these behaviors. The cool thing that Kim Quinlan is so good at for our program through CBT school is like coming up with papers. But the reason I put this in or worksheets is you can do something like this on your own, just kind of time checking behavior, etc. The other thing is starting to notice like grooming, right? Obviously, different factors come into play when it comes to grooming. Somebody who has really long hair is going to take longer to groom their hair than somebody without. But everybody with BDD should come up with sort of what kind of schedule or what kind of time period should grooming take and start to notice, connect awareness as well. I have clients that could spend 2 hours on their hair, or if their teeth is their focus, they're spending hours on their teeth, right? So starting to look, where are people getting stuck? Another factor in treatment is starting to reduce the comparison. So people are constantly comparing. I have a lot of clients that think they're the least attractive sibling. I have clients that will compare themselves to their partner, like, she's pretty and gets attention. I'm ugly, nobody pays attention to me. Remember, observation is something we all have to do. We have to be able to look and walk and not bump into things, but comparison is active. It's where you're genuinely putting other people on a pedestal and you're knocking yourself down. So it's working on being able to walk around, focus forward. And if you see somebody that your brain says, wow, they're very attractive, great. But that has nothing to do with me. It's an active process to continuously kind of bring yourself down and focus on other people. It never makes us feel good because people with BDD don't compare themselves up. They don't walk around and say, thank God I don't look like that. Instead, they're constantly finding people that they think are more attractive. If you're a family member, one of the biggest things you could be doing is just getting education. If you're a family member, you're already getting it coming here, but getting some education on the disorder and understanding what the treatment looks like and really helping people get into the treatment. That's one of the things that my mom was very, very central with, is really helping me find a therapist and get into treatment when I was at a point that I couldn't because I was so severe. Having patience, I would say that BDD treatment is a lot longer than OCD treatment. It doesn't have to be years and years, but it tends to be a little bit longer than OCD. So be patient with that. And also notice how you're being drawn into the BDD. Are you constantly telling your loved one, no, your skin looks great. No, you're not as ugly as you think. You look just as good as your siblings. So those kind of things are great temporary feelings, but the other person with BDD doesn't believe you anyways. And if they do, they're just asking for it over and over, which just perpetuates that there's this problem. And then being a supportive fan club, people with BDD, one of the biggest things they fear is that they're not going to ever have any love. So that's important. I'm going to not go over each individual ones, but these are BDD rules I came up with. I did borrow some from other clinicians and then added my own. But what you're really trying to do is take out a lot of that compulsive behavior throughout the day. And so people with BDD get very close into a mirror. So practicing looking at a mirror from an arm's length. I tell my clients, please don't wake up and race to the mirror and check your appearance. That perpetuates this idea that overnight your appearance can change. Don't look at the mirror 2 in the morning when you come back buzzed from a night out, because you'll see things on your face you didn't know were there and you'll start getting very fixated. So it's starting to put in some structured rules. The core component of BDD treatment is cognitive behavioral therapy. It works for about 60 to 80% of patients, especially if they also are taking medication. And the idea behind cognitive behavioral therapy is to start to help clients recognize, like, how did we get here? How have you gotten to the point that you think you're ugly, hideous, don't deserve to have a job or date or have friends? And often one of the things that happens as a positive outcome of the cognitive part of treatment is people typically realize, like, hey, the only person that seems to be fixated about my appearance and hate the way I look is me. And I've sort of kind of tapped out from going out with friends and dating and stuff. And my friends miss me. They want me to come back out. Nobody, especially now that I'm an adult, is constantly badgering me about my appearance or making fun of me. And in fact, I've had girls that have liked me in the past. So it's helping people stop getting so zoned in on their appearance and start to see, how did they get here? What are some errors in thinking? How could you see the situation from a different perspective? And some of the ways that we do that, I'll move on to this, is help a client slow down, kind of see a situation, and let's look at it differently. So this example, for instance, is somebody with BDD who walks into a restaurant and assumes everybody thinks that their sister looks better than them and that everybody's noticing their skin. So I'm going to go over these in a second, but part of what happens in BDD is we have these specific maladaptive cognitive errors that we fall into. In this case, mind reading. So I don't know about you. I never know what anybody at a restaurant is thinking. But people with BDD tend to think they project how they feel about their appearance onto other people and are consumed with the fact that everybody is thinking that they look terrible. And then personalization. I don't know about you, but when I have food in front of me, I'm not really concerned about other people I don't know. I'm concerned on eating. And so people with BDD tend to feel like other people are taking time out of their busy meal and focusing on them. So there's a list of questions we can ask clients that start to get their brains to think and start to kind of see the situation from a different perspective. So in this example, the clinician was asking this person, like, hey, do you have any evidence that people are thinking all these things about you. And it's like, no, I really don't. People seem to be looking at the person they're with or eating their food. Nobody really was like paying much attention to me. I'm just assuming that, but you're right. If I really kind of slow down for a second and look at the situation more clear, no, nobody seemed to really look up and pay a lot of attention. Is there a different point of view? Like, how would you explain this away if you had to come up with a different view? And it's like, I think people are thinking that there's stuff more important, like their dinner, their conversations. So starting to look at it more balanced. There's no evidence people are thinking about my appearance. It's more likely they're thinking about things that are more important to them, like their conversation. It's getting the client or the person with BDD. So for me, I assumed I knew what other people were thinking about me, which had me not date or leave the house or go out with friends. But when my therapist was kind of pushing back, like, how do you know all this? I'm like, you're right. I mean, if I've ever asked anybody about my appearance, they say I look fine. They don't see the same things I see. And questions like this help me kind of come to the conclusion like a lot of this stuff was internal. Did kids tease me when I was a kid? Sure. But just like I'm not going to go to ask a fourth grader for life advice, I shouldn't, as an adult, have a fourth grade who called me ugly and stinky, turn around and like let those thoughts just live forever. But people with BDD will remember those comments people said when they're younger and stick with them. These are the distortions. I'm not going to go through them, but I think of them as like when you turn in your car and you have all these lights on your dashboard, it indicates something wrong. Same thing. If you're looking at the different thoughts you have, and it's important with BDD to start tracking your thoughts and seeing like exactly what you're thinking on a consistent basis. These are the different distortions you're going to start to see in your thoughts. You're going to notice beauty or beast. Either you look perfect and everything about your appearance is great, or you look terrible, right? Or this idea that like catastrophizing, right? I look so bad, I'm never going to get a job, nobody's ever going to date me, I'm going to be alone and die single. Or mind reading, right? Everybody's thinking about my appearance and they all think my nose is terrible. Well, you're going to start to be able to see that that's pretty extreme, right? Most of people out there, even if they're not the Brad Pitts of the world, right? Or the Jacob Elordis from my generation. They're still dating. They still have a girlfriend. They still have kids. They're still living their best life. So why do you have to live by a different set of rules? So that's very important. And these are just a list of some of those distortions. One of the things that we then do next in treatment is known as perceptual retraining. And the idea behind it is people with BDD tend to look at themselves very different. You have to remember, none of us will truly know what we look like because we're never going to be able to get out of ourselves and then look at ourselves. We only see ourselves through pictures, through videos, through reflective surfaces, which you got to cut. They're like funhouse mirrors. If you try to ever look at yourself like in a spoon or on your phone when it turns off and look at yourself in the black screen, we all look weird, right? So we're going to take those out. But if you do look at a mirror, we have to start taking that arm's length, make comfortable eye contact, see our whole selves, and start to work on making objective observations versus those subjective judgments. So I have clients, for instance, bring pictures to the office and say, how do you look at yourself? Well, they're scrolling and getting really big and wide, and then they're staring at their nose and they're judging it and telling themselves how ugly they look in the picture and their nose looks huge, and then deleting the picture and walking away defeated, right? Well, let's relook at that picture. Let's not zoom in. Let's just kind of observe what's happening in the picture. What are you even doing? Why'd you take this picture? And let's look at your whole self, right? What shoes are you wearing? How is your hair done, etc. Over time, what clients will tell me is like, yeah, I may have a few pimples here or there, but when I look at my whole self, they're so small. Before, when I'd sit in front of the mirror for hours and stare at them, they felt like they were my whole face. And then the last part of treatment is going to be known as exposure with response prevention. The idea behind exposure with response prevention is we are going to start to face the things that we are afraid of. We're going to start facing those things that we avoid. So let's say I'll use, makeup. This is an example, right? Does this mean everybody with BDD should not wear makeup? No. Just like my male clients are starting to wear tinted sunscreen, it doesn't mean you have to stop doing that. Just because you have BDD, you're able to take care of your appearance, you're able to do your hair and makeup, etc. But if the sole purpose is because of covering up the flaw that you feel you have and you're doing it in excess, that's what we're going to work on. So an example is I have clients that live alone, but they still do a full face of makeup when they're at home by themselves, just in case, right? So it's starting to say, how can we take away some of this compulsive behavior? Sure, you can still wear makeup, but if you're literally just running to your car to grab something, you do not have to spend an hour to do it if you were planning on staying home that day. So it'd be working on a client starting to slowly pull back those compulsive behaviors and working on that. So, maybe I'll never have a client if they like to wear makeup, not wear makeup going out to dinner. But can you do a quick 5-minute routine versus spending hours on makeup? An example for other body parts might be wearing clothes that fit someone versus baggy clothes if they don't like the way that their body looks. It might be somebody who always wears a hat because they have compulsions around their hairline to leave the house not wearing a hat because inevitably you're going to have to go somewhere without a hat. And it's just tracking that, right? And starting to slowly face things. We don't go overboard. We don't wear fat suits. We don't put red spots on our face. We don't do things that are going to create an illusion because that's what we're trying to do in BDD treatment is show you that you actually don't look, as overboard as you think, but it's really starting to get to a point where you are able to just like do your normal skincare, hair care, etc., and then go versus investing hours upon it with that specific goal of covering up your appearance. One thing I like to do with clients is before we go out to the mall or to a public venue, because most people with BDD haven't been doing that, we'll fill out those 2 boxes first. And, it's basically asking, like, what do you think will happen if you go out in public? And when we come back, we fill the second half, and clients will always tell me, you know what, nothing bad happened like I thought it happened. My brain has always over assumed it'll be terrible. And then I go out and it's not a problem at all. Here's just a quick overview of the treatment that's in the slides that you're going to receive. And then lastly, we're also identifying those core beliefs. Most of my clients feel that they'll never be loved. They're not worthy enough to have an opinion. They're the ugliest family member. They can't have friends if they don't look better. And by doing all the treatment as well as the behavioral part to back it up, clients will learn. I had a client that she wasn't going to date until she got a chin surgery. I said, look, if you're going to get it, because that is an intense with a lot of potential problem surgery, why don't you wait until you do treatment first? And during treatment, I'm like, what if you started putting yourself on dating apps and started talking to guys and going out with your friends again? And she ended up getting a boyfriend. It's like, look, your brain told you you could not date until your chin was fixed. Now you have a whole boyfriend and you're going out and you have a good time, but you never fixed the body part. And it's to learn that it's never about your body part. Finally, because I have 36 seconds before I want to do Q&A. Lastly, what I'm going to work on with a client is starting to redefine your identity outside your looks. For example, I'm an uncle. I have the 3 coolest nephews in the world. I'm super loyal to people. I'm the greatest nephew my aunts and uncles have. So it's like, I'm an advocate, a therapist. Like, what are the other things that define you? My clients might be talented musicians or amazing artists, and they don't even bring it up ever in session until the very end. And it's like, dude, there's so many other cool things besides your looks. Additionally, it's getting somebody back into activities. Most people with BDD are spending a lot of their time on their appearance. And so it's getting you back into the things that you find important. What are some life goals? People need structure, and BDD isolates people from both structure and people. So I have clients go back to school, but in person, get a job in person, start to do outside activities so they can reconnect with people and helping them kind of find importances around other things. This is an example of somebody with BDD who's focused on their weight and their features. Hopefully afterwards they have other things that they find important. Then my final slide is BDD, people will ask, is BDD chronic? People can get like me where they are not fixated all the time on their appearance. They can speak in front of all the people that I'm speaking in front of right now and be on camera and take pictures, etc. But you age. And naturally, it seems, especially in America, we don't like to age and we find different things wrong with their appearance. And so what I work on with clients is these tools you'll learn in treatment. You got to be able to do them throughout the lifespan because as you get older, gray hairs are going to happen, or it's harder to lose the weight, or you might have sunspots, right? We can't keep going back to the beginning every time we find something we don't like. We have to embrace the change in who the person you are. Finally, just a couple links that are helpful. I didn't go over the first two slides, which have my contact information if you have it. But like I promised, I wanted to make sure that I had time for Q&A. But I'm hoping that is a good overview. And like I said, you'll get all of the slides. Yes, somebody said they wanted slides. I'll take the first question that's in the chat, and then if anybody has any questions in the chat, or want to ask questions live, I can get those as well.